waiting. I'll give you a brief update. Tyler is still in ICU, but they're giving him some different medicine. They hope they can get him out of ICU tomorrow or Tuesday. So hopefully get him out of that tough spot there and then get him in a regular room, and it'll be another week or so. They're just going to watch him now, see how he's doing. He looked good spirits. So we're certainly grateful to the Lord for that. Amen. They're going to stay up there for the duration. Dewey will be with them. He doesn't want his kids to leave town. He wants them right there. You can understand, I guess. So we can do that. All right, let's bow and have a word of prayer to begin our class here this morning. Our holy and wonderful Father, how great and mighty is your name. You are the King of kings, Lord of lords. You're the only one who has made life, who leads life, and will save and deliver us from the death in this world. Please, Father, forgive us as we approach you, that our souls will be clean, our minds will be clear, as we thank you for this day, which is your day, and the opportunity to open your word, read from it, learn from it, walk closer with you as we see who you are, and for the opportunity to thank you for what you have done. The giving of your Son, the hope of life eternal we have through his sacrifice. We thank you for this congregation and for the people who are striving to walk with you. Father, please carry us through the days that are ahead, that our faith will grow stronger each day. Please, Father, be patient with us as we are patient, merciful with each other, and lead us home. Through Christ we pray. Amen. All right, we're in the 4th chapter of Judges. We began the story of Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the battle that is going to ensue between Deborah, her commander Barak, and what he will do to lead the people against Jabin and the king. Well, there's a route there. Let's see if I can, if we put this up here. Yes. Wednesday night we were talking about Hazor, and we cannot overstate how important this city was. That in the early years when Joshua came into Canaan, and throughout the time to the Judges, Hazor was the capital city in the sense that it was the biggest, the strongest, and the king of Hazor. Jabin, likely a title. There's a Jabin in the days of Joshua. There's a Jabin here in the day of the Judges. That the king would rule this valley and ruled it hard. They had 900 chariots of iron. They were the military machine during that time. And we had noted about the fact that it had been sacked by Joshua and had been burned. In this temple right here, if you went inside it to see, I'm trying to get a few pictures here for you. This is the entrance looking out over the altar, out over to the east of the valley, of all of which they ruled. That Joshua came and burned it down. And let's see, there it is. There's some of the stones that were at the base that Joshua had burned. You wonder, well, how can you burn a wall of stone? Well, what they would do is that they would pile large piles of wood and build a fire and make it super, super hot. Keep feeding it till finally the rocks would crack. You see all the cracks on those rocks right there. So whatever was built on top of them came down. So they had no more strength. And that's one of the ways that they could do that. They just looked at that and thought, well, these stones have been burned. And they found an ash line through it. See the rocks on the bottom? That black ash line there, what was left, they built on top of that. You see the later stones that would come. This was a few hundred years later after Joshua. And they're trying to figure out what on earth was going on there. Well, there was the ash and burn marks, and they finally figured it out. Someone pointed out, you know, if you'll read in the Bible, you'll read the story of what happened to them. And they put it all together, and they go, aha. And that was the aha moment. That's why Hazor is such an important spot. And if you go take a tour in Israel today, That's one of the main places they will stop and look at, because there's just so much history there, starting with the first Jabin, then Joshua, the second Jabin, and then Barak and Deborah, and then after that, Solomon came in, David came in and wiped them all out, and Solomon came back to that city and built the city on top of the ruins of the temples and the palaces. So what you're seeing here right now are stones that were buried under about 50 feet of dirt, that they had to clean through all of that and keep going down through layer after layer to find the beginnings of Hazor. And so that's how this figures into our story here. Let's come back to Hazor right there in Harosheth Hagim. They'll come into play here in just a moment. So we're looking at this story when Barak had come to Deborah. Deborah called him and said, "We're going to take Jabin." And he said, "I'm not going to go without you." And we talked a lot about that. And so in the 4th chapter here, in verse 14, we'll pick up. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Up, for this is the day in which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand." Sisera was one bad guy. He lived in this city, Harosheth Haggoyim. Looking back here, this is where it is back. See if I can do it like this where you can see it here. Up this valley and up here, Hazor is right about up there. So they would travel through that. These little black lines are the trade routes, the roads that they would carry and across. And so he was down there, and he was the bad guy. And Deborah said, "We're going to get him, and you're going to go take him, because he's got his forces together, which is perfect for us, because now that they're all together, we can take him down." And Barak, I'm sure, is thinking, has not the Lord gone out before you? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. The Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army with the edge of the sword before Barak, and Sisera alighted from his chariot and fled away. So they have the battle. They're wiped out. The commander takes off. What stands out in that verse to you? Here in verse 15. What's the one thing that stands out? That's right, there's no wrong answer. Well, yes, there is. What's the one thing that stands out in this verse right there?
It says the Lord routed.
That's right. It's not Barak. It's not Deborah. It's not any of the other Israelite warriors. The hero of this story is God. And this is the way it's going to be now, from now to the rest of the book. We would argue even before that. Yeah, the hero was God. God's the hero in this book. This, as we have said, this is not a book of heroes. These are anti-heroes. These people are flawed. The one hero in this whole theme of the book of Judges is that God is the one who's in control. God is the one who's going to lead them into victory if they'll follow him. Sometimes it takes a little while. And I'll add one more thing here. With a few exceptions in this book, God will use very flawed people to do his will. And that's surely going to come into play this morning in our story here. Let's keep reading on. In verse 16. But Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth Haggoyim. That's right, that's his hometown. And all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. This is total annihilation. But there's one man left. That, of course, is Sisera. Verse 17. However, Sisera had fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. For there was peace between Jabin, king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. Now, they had somehow fashioned some kind of confederacy together, peace and alliance with them. And he knew that. And so this wasn't something that he was taking a chance on. But there was a pre-arranged confederacy there was an alliance between these people, this family, Heber, Jael, and Sisera, and Jabin. So Sisera said, okay, here's a place that he's looking for a place to hide. He's scared to death. Now, one interesting side note here is about Sisera. This is the mighty soldier. Not anymore. His army's gone. Where's his chariots? They're gone. I mean, all of the power, all of the people, all of the army, all of the prestige, authority, etc., that he had before, it's gone. And he's running for his life. So he will come here to Jael, in her tent. And the interesting thing here is that when he fled away to this tent, verse 18, Jael went out to meet him. She didn't stay in the tent, and she said to him, "Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me, do not fear." She's flagging him down. In here, in here. It'll be safe in here. Now, normally a woman didn't do that if she was an Israelite woman. She's a Canaanite. They have no problem with that. He has no problem with that. Some have argued, well, that was something for Sisera to go into the tent of this woman, that even though he knew that, they would always say, "Is the man here?" No, that's not here. Not among the Canaanites. Among the Israelites, yes. But not here. So she said, come on in, come on in, come on in. You're safe in here. And so don't you know, he's just wiped out anyway from running and from fighting. And so he went out to meet Sisera and said, "Turn aside, my lord. Come to me." And when he had turned aside with her into the tent, she covered him with a blanket. Now, that's interesting here, is that she's going to cover him. And 2 or 3 things can come into this story. First of all, to hide him, and he's readily covered. Yes, go ahead, cover me. He might feel safe now that nobody can see me. Another aspect that I think is also applicable here, she knows what she's about to do. And she wants him to be quiet. We don't want him yelling here. So she covers him with this blanket. Maybe it's the skin of an animal. I don't know. Would they weave it? They got him from the Navajos and weaved it. I don't know how that worked. But he got some kind of blanket and they covered him. And she said in verse 19, he said, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." So she opened a jug of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him. Now, he asked for water. She gives him milk. What do you think the reasons would be for that? I can think of at least a couple. Why would she give him milk? Some have thought that this would make him sleepy. You know, all the whatever it is in the milk that makes people sleepy. That might be. I think he's already bushed. He's tired. It's not going to take much for him to go to sleep. And another thing is that she's adding to his sense of security. You know, who gives you milk? Mothers do. So she's mothering him. You come in here, I'm going to cover you up. Get you nice and safe and covered. I need a glass of water. Well, we don't have glasses in this century, but I'll give you, I don't know why they just gave me. Give me a jug. Give me some water. She gave him some milk. And so he's getting settled down. And once he is settled down, he said, verse 20, "Stand at the door of the tent, and if any man comes and inquires of you, say, 'Is there any man here?' You shall say, 'No.'" Now, he is saying that if they're out looking for me, which they were, and which he surely understood, tell them no. Tell them I'm not here. Tell them no man's here. Just move them on here to keep me safe. And that's what would have happened at that time. She'll say no. Verse 21, "Then Jael, Heber's wife, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand and went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple. And it went down into the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary. So he died." The old expression, "didn't know what hit him." I think that is probably here. But she drove it with such force Now, what would allow a woman to swing a hammer that hard? She worked out a lot. She lifted a lot of animals in. Angry, fearful. A lot of that could go in here. Let me throw one little thought into the mix. Jael is not a faithful worshiper of God. Don't make the mistake that Jael is like Rahab in Jericho. Rahab and Jael are two different women. Rahab believed God, wanted to follow God, offered herself to God's people and said, I will do whatever you need me to do, but I want you to remember me and my family because we're going to be following God. So Rahab, it's clear what her intentions are and her faith and where her faith is. Jael, she's a Kenite. They're collaborators with the people of Hazor. They're Canaanites. They don't care. Could it be? I'm thinking, yes, it certainly is. God's using her for his will, for his purpose. He's going to continue to preserve the Israelites. You know, at the beginning of the book of Judges, his claim to them was, I'm not going to drive the Canaanites out when you should have. I'm going to let them stay so that they can be a snare to you. But he also said so that they can test you. And so God comes along. I think that's what we had, as we mentioned Wednesday night, with Shamgar. Who is he? He just came out of nowhere and went down and took care of the Philistines without any help from the Israelites. He just took care of them. God had a messenger to do something. Here, I think, likewise with Jael, God uses this woman to go after the enemy of the people of Israel. You think about the army of Hazor, it's gone. I mean, would it ever recover? What if Sisera survived? What if he did hide and then the Israelites left? What would he do? Where would he go? There wouldn't be a city for him to go back to. The city of Hazor is gone. The people are gone. The Israelites have come down to his hometown, driven the army all the way up to his home street, and wiped them all out. This guy, Sisera, he has nobody. He's all alone. He has gone from the commander of the greatest army of that time in that part of the world to a fugitive. So where is he going to go? It's as if the Lord says, all right, we have one more nail to drive in the coffin to put a lid on this. It won't be a nail, it'll be a tent peg. And we're not going to get an Israelite to do it. We're going to get a Canaanite. And not a man, but a woman. And of course, now we know from Deborah's previous prophecy that the woman will receive the glory. It would be Jael, not Deborah. It was Jael. And she's not even an Israelite. So how God would use people. Now, I'm going to stop here and preach a 30-second sermon. The same thing is true today. Whatever we may think about other peoples in other countries and other cultures, God still will use them for his will. So don't think that we as Americans are the only people who the Lord will exclusively deal with. That's not the case. We don't know what the plan for the Lord is in the future, but he has always demonstrated that he uses all peoples. Doesn't mean that he approves of them, but he would use them. And such is the case right here. So just a thought to put back there. The fact that God would allow something to succeed doesn't mean that he approves of it. Part of his plan. And who knows how and what that would be. Okay, any question or comment about what we've read so far? All right. So she takes this peg and the hammer and drives it right through to the ground. He's gone. Verse 22. And then as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said to him, come, I will show you the man whom you're looking for, whom you seek. And when he went into her tent, there lay Sisera, dead with the peg in his temple. What do you suppose was going through Barak's mind when he walked in there and saw that? This is the bad guy that we've been trying to catch that has destroyed so many of us. And now here's this woman with says, I've got him in here. I'm sure he's full of questions. How'd you do this? John?
I've always found it interesting that she could have done everything the same without killing him. Right? He was knocked out of sleep. She could have just waved down, hey, here he is. She actually did him a favor by killing him. Because who knows what
Yeah.
the Israelites would have done.
Yeah. Tortured him, put him on display.
Yeah.
The higher the rank of the man, the greater the victory to parade him among the people as the spoils of their victory. That's right. What I'd always thought is, well, that was a good way to go because he never knew what happened. There was no torture. There was no pain. Maybe that was too good for him. I don't know. But a thought crosses my mind as I stand back and look at the whole story. Why she is so accommodative to Barak. I think there was a hatred that she had for Jael because he, as Jael had for Sisera, he, as the commander of the army, brought the wrath of God down upon them. And this was an ugly time to live. It was a dangerous. And she may be thinking, this is one bad guy that I've got him right here. Maybe I can take care of this right now. She assassinated him, basically, is what she did. And so possibly that could be the case. I don't know. Interesting to think about this. But this story harkens back to Ehud stabbing Eglon in the stomach. And this one, the pig, two really graphic scenes of where these people come out of nowhere and they do a wildly violent thing for the people. James?
I think there's the possibility that this particular group of Kenites could have been friendly to the Israelites. Because in Judges chapter 1 it says, the descendants of the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up with the people of Judah and went and lived with the people of Judah. So I don't know. It's so hard to say because the Kenites are kind of here and there, and
right.
Not really, and it doesn't really directly identify that. But I wonder if that's why, she could have had some sort of hatred. There's plenty of other reasons, but they could have been friendly-ish to the Israelites without being an actual part of their nation, and she sees an opportunity here and takes it.
I think that's exactly right. You go back to the first chapter, there's that connection. How strong it was, we don't know. It may have been back and forth and back and forth. They were loosely connected, but from what we just read here, there was an understanding between the house of Heber and Jabin. So they had a personal, direct, intimate connection together. But the tribes before coming from Moses, there was, as James has pointed out, there's some cousins in there. And they had some kind of affiliation. So maybe that is one of the reasons why Barak didn't hesitate to go inside the tent where Jael was. And how that, y'all have time this morning? You got up an hour early. Yeah. Just something about asking a man to come in the tent, or a man coming, is there a man in there? And they would not come in if it was just a woman, but Sisera did. When my dad was a young guy, he did a lot of hunting in New Mexico. And down in Lincoln County, you know anything about the history of Billy the Kid and all that kind of stuff. And he became friends with this family that owned a huge ranch down there where all of the outlaws lived, etc. Been in the family for many generations. And I was on a trip in college. I've just taken off cross country. My dad said, if you go into Silver City around there, he said, go down to the ranch and go speak to him. He said, just tell him I said hi. And I made that way down there, and there was a ranch. And I went up and I knocked on the door, and this old gentleman came out, and it was his great-grandfather that built the ranch, the Frost Ranch. And when he found out you're Kenny's boy, yeah, and you come out and you want to tell me all these stories. One of the stories that he said that really caught my attention, he said that the Overland stage came through there. And they would have all kinds of people and outlaws, etc. And people knew who the outlaws were. It would rob the stages, etc. Because this literally was the Wild West back then. And he said during those days that his great-grandmother told him that when men would come through, you don't know who they were. They could be good, they could be bad. But they would not go in the house. They would yell from outside and say, do you have some food? We're hungry. She said if they knew that the men were out with the cattle or out working, they would not go in the house out of respect. These are the men who were the outlaws, who were robbing the banks and the stages, etc., for whatever reason that they would justify themselves in. They were telling me there was a decorum in that Old West, that even among the outlaws, that they would not disrespect the man and the woman by going in their house if a man was not there. So they'd always announce that. And that always fascinated me. Here in this story right here, some writers have talked about, well, he had no scruples at all. Well, they're Canaanites, and they don't care. They have all kinds of stuff. Maybe the old West outlaws of America were better men than the Canaanites. All right, anyway, I just throw that out for your perusal and throwing it away. Okay, so he died. Barak pursued him. Jael came out. Verse 22, come see him. I'll show you the man. He sees that. Verse 23. So on that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, in the presence of the children of Israel. Here it comes up again, what we just read. Who was the hero? God was. God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, in the presence of the children of Israel. The presence of the children of Israel is this. So this is on display for them to know, to see, to remember, and understand. This is what you have to know. This is what you have to recognize, is God's telling his people, I told you I would help you, but I told you you were going to have trouble. And here it is, and they could not save themselves. God's the one who bailed them out. So verse 24, in the hand of the children of Israel grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. They will take it all down and they will take it back. Now, a couple of things here now. Chapter 4 and chapter 5 are parallel, because now those of you who've gone ahead know the Song of Deborah. When you start reading chapter 5, it almost is kind of repeating itself. Here's what we have in chapter 4 and 5. Chapter 4 is the chronological record of what had happened. When we get to chapter 5, this is the celebratory record. That is, here's the praise, here's the thanksgiving. They are elated for this victory. And now in the back here, where these men are, they are grateful for what has happened. And Deborah says, here it is. This is what happened. This is what the Lord did for us. And that's how we'll start the 5th chapter. One of the interesting things is to take chapter 5, chapter 4, put them next to each other, and they'll start filling in gaps. And they'll kind of fit like this here, that we'll see some other things. But this is said in a very poetic way here in chapter 5. Okay, any question about what has happened so far? James?
It's just always funny whenever they have songs like this, where you're like, I don't listen to a lot of songs about women smashing tent pegs. How does that tune go?
Yeah. I remember it was a catchy tune. Yeah, okay, we'll take this moment to pass on something that one of our dear sisters here gave me a few days ago, that evidently there was a young man that used to attend here at El Cajon. He now lives in Texas somewhere. I don't know his name. I don't know. He's not married yet, but he made the comment that I'm no longer looking for a worthy woman wife of Proverbs 31. I don't want a wife like that. I want a wife that will drive a tent peg through the temple of someone who would attack my family. That's the kind of wife I want. Okay? You have at her. Good luck with that. All right. We'll begin here now, the 5th chapter, and here is where Deborah begins to sing this song, repeat this poem. And it's going to use very, there'll be some hyperbole, there'll be some very poetic phrases here. Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, sang on that day saying. I don't know if they sat down and wrote it, it just came to them. This is inspiration, however this works, but this is what it is. Verse 2. When leaders lead in Israel, when the people willingly offer themselves, bless the Lord. There's a sermon right there. Verse 2 is a really good, poignant, complete, relevant sermon. When leaders lead, when the people willingly offer themselves, bless the Lord. The Lord is the reason for that. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes. Even I will sing to the Lord. I will sing praise to the Lord God of Israel. Take notice, here's my song, she says. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the field of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens poured, and the clouds also poured water. The mountains gushed before the Lord, this Sinai before the Lord God of Israel. Now, the people sometimes would be frightened by the sound of marching men and rolling chariots. You think about the sound of 900 chariots rolling through the valley. When people would hear that, that would strike fear into them. We know in the military that many occasions like that in wars that have happened through the years, that sound of bombers coming in low scared people, or helicopters coming in, attack helicopters. The men on the ground were terrified from the sound and how they could be taken so quickly. Here, Deborah says, yeah, remember Mount Sinai? The Mount of Fire, the earthquake. This was a lot bigger than just a plane flying over or a tank rolling through, as we would see, or as she would say, as a chariot rolling through. Verse 4, verse 5. The mountains gush before the Lord, this Sinai before the Lord God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were deserted. The travelers walked along the byways. Village life ceased in Israel, until I, Deborah, arose a mother in Israel. They chose new gods. Then there was war in the gates. Not a shield or spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel. My heart is with the rulers of Israel who offered themselves willingly with the people. Bless the Lord. There was terror in the land because of Jabin. And the villages were deserted. They were clearing out. They were looking for places to hide as they rolled through the valleys. And he said, and she said, called out to the Lord would send raise his people up, and bless the Lord that it happened. Verse 10, speak, you who ride on white donkeys. That's a prominence. It's like an animal that showed their royalty, their dignity, their position. Who sit in judges' attire, who walk along the road, far from the noise of the archers among the watering places. There they shall recount the righteous acts of the Lord, the righteous acts for his villagers in Israel. Then the people of the Lord shall go down to the gates. The picture here is that the leaders, the politicians, the man who pushes the button, pulls the lever, because they're over here on their fancy animals and in their fancy tents and in their fancy places. They're away from the valley where the battle is going. They get away from that. And that's so typical. The great commanders of every war of every nation were the men who got right in the middle of it and went to the front. But it was the politicians who caused the war very often. They're sitting back in their castle or in their king, in their kingly state or in their headquarters. And that's what she's saying here. Verse 12, awake, awake, Deborah, awake, get up, wake, sing a song, arise, Barak. Lead your captives away, O son of Abinoam. The Lord has delivered them into their hand. Then the survivors came down, the people against the nobles. The Lord came down for me against the mighty. The people came out of the mountains, came out of it, and they went after the nobles, the ones who were the cause of all this mess. And from Ephraim, verse 14, where those roots were in Amalek, whose roots were in Amalek. After you, Benjamin, and with your peoples, from Machir, rulers came down, and from Zebulun, those who bear the recruiter's staff, and the princes of Issachar, were with Deborah. As Issachar, so was Barak, sent into the valley under his command. Among the divisions of Reuben, there were great resolves of heart. Now you see what's happening here is that as the call to battle is made, the tribes are now coming out of the woods. They're all being called to this. They see this now. Okay, God's going to lead us here. And we're going to take this. And this is what Deborah is celebrating, how they all would come together as one. Verse 16, why do you sit among the sheepfolds to hear the pipings for the flocks? The divisions of Reuben have great searchings of heart. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan. And why did Dan remain on the ships? Ooh, she's calling out those who fought, and she's calling out those who didn't, who refused. Asher continued at the seashore and stayed by his inlets. Zebulun is a people who jeopardize their lives to the point of death. Naphtali also on the heights of the battlefield. This is great praise for Zebulun and Naphtali. The kings came and fought. Then the kings of Canaan fought. In Tanakh, by the waters of Megiddo, they took no spoils of silver. They fought from the heavens. The stars from their courses fought against Sisera. The torrent of Kishon swept them away. That ancient torrent, the torrent of Kishon. Oh, my soul, march on in strength. Yeah, go ahead, Rodney.
It seems to me that Sisera, I don't know if, again, this could be just hypothetical, but I don't know if he was at the front of the battle. Like, with this part of the Song of Deborah, and he ran really quick after he knew, he heard a bunch of guys coming at him, and he knew he was going to die. Because if he was that bad, he would have stood up in front and fought that battle until everyone was dead.
Right.
But I think that, and I believe that the faith of these Israelites was so strong, and these guys came roaring in, he just said, oh no, we're going to die.
Right.
And he took off running.
And Sisera, because of his past victories and strength, thought that we're going to take this pretty quick. And it was a very abrupt, sobering, and frightening reality that I have made a huge mistake. One little side note here, it may not be important to many of you, but it sure was interesting to me. Do you remember about 20 years ago on PBS, the series of the Civil War had started? And I imagine most people have seen at least parts of it, the Ken Burns series on the Civil War. And there was one gentleman from Memphis that they interviewed extensively. His name was Shelby Foote. Very unforgettable character. Had the Mississippi drawl. He was raised in Mississippi. He had written books. Matter of fact, much of the Civil War was based on his research. He's passed away now, but he has written multiple books on the Civil War, studied extensively, was considered the singular expert on it. He wrote a book on the story of Gettysburg, and if you know anything about Gettysburg and how this was called the high water mark of the Confederacy, where they charged the hill and the Union soldiers drove them back, and it was Robert E. Lee's greatest defeat. And he writes about that. And the title of the book was The Stars and Their Courses. When he was interviewed, he was asked, why did you choose that title? He said, well, it's in the Bible. Judges chapter 5, verse 20. It's a reference to Sisera. When they fought from the heavens, the stars from their courses fought against Sisera. That means it wasn't meant to be. Heaven was moving against Sisera, and there's nothing that he could have done. As brilliant and as successful he had been in the past for what he had done, it wasn't going to happen this time. God was using all of these people, the stars in their courses, were going to defeat Sisera. And I thought that was interesting how that was connected to Gettysburg and the Civil War. And that's how he saw, as a Southerner, saw how the Confederacy was defeated. It was in the stars. The stars in their courses. Fate. They were not going to win. And so his spin on it was, and I think many would, out here would agree, maybe not in Biloxi, Mississippi, but that this was fate, this was God, this is providence. This was not going to happen. They were going to be defeated right here. And it's a fascinating, but has anybody ever been to Gettysburg? Boy, you really should go there. It's just a fascinating place. We took the kids there years ago by accident, and this is great. We were on a trip where hey, look at that. Let's go there. Okay. We had no plans, and just let's see what's out in front of us. And boy, we're glad we did that. It was fascinating. Anyway, I just a little note there in passing. It's in the fate of the stars. The stars are going against Sisera. There's not a chance that he's going to win. Is that because of Barak? Is it because of Deborah? Is it because of Jael? Is it because of any? No, it's because of God. God's the one who creates this victory. John?
And it's always interesting. He could have done it with 100 men, with 50 men. He didn't need 10,000. He could have done it with any number he wanted to.
He did it with 2 tribes. The rest of them, they all, and Deborah's going to, spank him for that. But God didn't need them. Got those 2 tribes and went after that tribe. Those 10,000 men. And of course, he will do that in just a little bit here with Gideon. Okay, to hasten on here. I'm not sure if we'll have time to get through all of this here. Let's pick up in verse 24. Most blessed among women is Jael. Now, whatever we said or thought or think about her, Deborah says she is blessed, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Blessed is she among women in tents. Pardon me, I have to believe. I have to believe there were multiple occasions where comments were made to men's wives about a woman in a tent when a man would see his wife pick up a tent peg. It became a legend among the people, I think is what's going, is that this was a story that they joked about, they talked about, they teased about. Maybe the woman sometimes in frustration in the tent with her husband would pick up a tent peg and say, you remember that guy Sisera? This became part of the vernacular of their language and of their culture. And so Jael is blessed among the women. She's kind of a hero to the women. He asked for water, she gave milk. She brought out cream in a lordly bowl. Lordly bowl would signify, we have a special cup for you. So he feels secure, he feels privileged. That's right. She's going to make him feel right at home. Make yourself at home, sis. She stretched her hand to the tent peg, her right hand to the workman's hammer. She pounded Sisera. She pierced his head. She split and struck through his temple. At her feet he sank. He fell. He lay still. At her feet he sank. He fell. Where he sank, there he fell dead. She repeats this to show this was a big moment. This was a big deal. He's dead. Could not raise a hand in defense. It was over. The mother of Sisera looked through the window and cried out through the lattice, why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarries the clatter of his chariots? Now she goes in this song and goes back to this city, Harosheth-Haggoyim, where he's from, and his mother is at home, and she's looking out through the lattice and said, why isn't he back now? Because a lot of people are coming into town. It's like the war is over now, because they chased him all the way to this town. And she's, where's my boy? I don't hear the rumble of his chariot. Oh, there's consequences, yes. Her wisest ladies, verse 29, answered her. Yes, she answered herself. Are they not finding and dividing the spoil to every man, a girl or 2? For Sisera, plunder of garments, embroidered and dyed, 2 pieces of dyed embroidery for the neck of the looter. they're saying, oh, it's going to, they're having a great time right now. They're just dividing the spoil. They're having a big party. That's where trying to make her feel. Well, verse 31, thus let all your enemies perish, O Lord. Let them die that same way. But let those who love him be like the sun when it comes out in full strength. So the land had rest for 40 years. Let the sun come up. Let that victory, let that wonderful feeling when the sun comes up. You ever been out camping when it got bitterly cold at night and it got rough and the nights got really long and you're just waiting and waiting for the sun to come up? And when it finally does come up, how everything starts thawing out and warming up. Okay, now this is better. I can see, I can feel, I can work, I can do. Oh yeah, where would we be without the sun? That's what Deborah's saying. This victory was just like the sun coming up. Finally, the night, this long, dark night of terror is over. Now we have 40 years of rest. Wonderful thing, how that happened. This is the more extensive one that we look at in this cycle here. But now we're going to move on to some of the most infamous. Any question or comment about what we've sorted? Yeah.
As far as the way Sisera died, as a soldier, that's a worse way to die.
Right.
In the Bible, they always talk about, like, I forget the story, but the lady threw the millstone and it hit the guy, and he's like, this girl's, I'm going to die from this servant girl, please stab me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And